Undercover boss buys snacks at his theater, freezes when he hears two girls blame management for poor service. Under the quiet gray clouds of a late weekend afternoon, John, the founder of the Sunrise Cinema chain, stood silently before the grand glass doors of his very first location. It was here, more than 15 years ago, that he had personally wiped down each leather seat and switched on every light before each screening. Sunrise had once been the greatest dream of his life, a place where every film wasn't just shown, but experienced with the heart. But since Sunrise expanded into a nationwide cinema chain with dozens of locations, John had stepped away from the front lines. Piles of polished reports filled with vibrant green profit charts and perfectly presented customer satisfaction surveys, all of them, declared that Sunrise remained the top destination for movie lovers. And yet, lately, unsettling winds began to blow. Messages from old friends, feedback from loyal longtime customers, even a few handwritten letters quietly sent to headquarters all carried the same message. Sunrise isn't what it used to be. So, without any prior announcement, without luxury cars or entourages, John donned a simple jacket, pulled his cap low, and disguised himself as an ordinary customer. He chose a weekend, the busiest time, to feel firsthand the things no report could ever reveal. As he stepped through the glass doors, he was no longer greeted by the warm smiles he had once instilled as the brand's culture. Instead, tired faces and indifferent glances from the staff met him. Not a single welcome, no guidance. The showtime board displayed outdated schedules, and the ticket counter was a chaotic mess of customers waiting in disarray. John clenched his fists inside his pockets, a heavy feeling rising in his chest. He took a deep breath and quietly entered the theater lobby. The journey to uncover the truth had begun not through polished reports, but through the very heartbeat of the brand he had poured his youth into building. The sunrise is only beautiful when you truly see it. And today, John wanted to see it clearer than ever before. Crowds swarmed the snack counter, the rich aroma of buttery popcorn blended with the sweet scent of soda, but it couldn't mask the oppressive air of delay and disarray. John stood quietly in line, his cap pulled low to hide his familiar face. He wondered, if the staff recognized me, would they act differently? But what he was about to witness would soon make him forget that question entirely. Just ahead of him, two young women barely in their 20s stood staring wearily at the flickering, dimly lit menu screen. One sighed heavily, shaking her head in frustration. The service here is awful. Prices keep going up, but the way they treat customers is just plain terrible. The other leaned closer, her voice low but bitter, just loud enough for John to catch every word. Back when the old owner was in charge, it wasn't like this. Now they only care about making money. Who even cares if the customers are happy anymore? John froze in place, his body suddenly sinking as if someone had placed a heavy stone on his shoulders. The cold drink in his hand now felt unbearably heavy. He looked around but couldn't recognize even a hint of the warm glow that Sunrise once had. All that remained were the frowns of unhappy customers, staff moving silently like machines, and a space that had once been a symbol of memorable experiences now turned cold and distant. In that moment, the perfect profit reports he had once proudly reviewed, the thick stacks of statistics stamped stable, suddenly felt like nothing more than cold, meaningless sheets of paper. Have I been away for too long? He hesitated no more. The true sunrise he had once dreamed of seemed hidden behind curtains named profit, and now it was time to pull them down with his own hands. John didn't just return once, but many times in quiet mornings when the theater was still empty, on busy weekend afternoons, and even on late nights when the flickering neon lights buzzed weakly in empty hallways. He no longer viewed Sunrise through black and white reports, but through the weary eyes and faded smiles of those who had once been its beating heart. In a small storage area behind the snack counter, John quietly witnessed the branch manager coldly scolding the staff. Gary's eyes showed no warmth as he ruthlessly cut costs: cheap napkins, near-expiry popcorn, soda diluted with water to stretch profits. The quiet sighs of the employees blended into the rattling sound of the old popcorn machine groaning in the corner. Amid the overwhelming crowd, John observed each popcorn order hastily packaged stale and cold. The sweet, buttery scent of the past was gone, replaced by the stench of old oil and burnt kernels. The soda in the cloudy cups was flavorless, yet the electronic board flashed the same sky-high prices. The staff moved lifelessly, serving customers like emotionless robots. When customers complained, they only bowed their heads or muttered weak apologies, never offering even a single genuine smile. And Gary, he remained locked away in his office behind frosted glass, as if the weary sighs outside simply didn't exist. John found himself standing once again in the dim hallway, Near the old theater wing once, fondly known as the Sunrise Corner, a special space reserved for loyal customers who held cherished memories of Sunrise. And there, he saw them again, two young women. They quietly counted the few coins in their hands, barely enough to buy the smallest bag of popcorn. They sat down at a distant corner seat, their hands tightly clutching the tiny bag of popcorn. In their eyes was a sorrow they couldn't hide, but shimmering within it was also a faint glimmer of hope. Even with so little, they still came back, still sat in the place once filled with happy memories, if afraid that if they stopped hoping, Sunrise would disappear forever. Standing in the shadows, John felt his heart sink. Everything he had once believed in the enormous profit numbers, the polished reports claiming everything is fine now, seemed like curtains drawn to conceal the silent decay of an entire legacy. He, the very founder who had started all of this with a single small screening room and the dream of bringing perfect cinematic experiences to everyone, had let go for far too long. He had believed that delegating power would help Sunrise grow. But in doing so, he had also unknowingly given away the soul of this place. And then, as he watched the small silhouettes of those two girls fade into the theater, John silently cried out in his heart, "I can't let this Sunrise fade away. I can't." Beneath the dim hallway lights, where faded movie posters still hung loosely as silent witnesses to a long-past golden age, John stood motionless for a long time. His shadow blended into the darkened walls, but in his eyes burned the fierce turmoil of regret and resolve. The metallic shutters clattered down, signaling the end of another day. But John didn't leave. He quietly wandered through the empty rows of seats, his hand brushing across the worn leather chairs, his fingers tracing every scratch that held the weight of memories. At the far end of the theater, in the space once known as the Sunrise Corner, a place John had once been most proud of, he stopped. The two girls were still there, sitting quietly. Their tiny bag of popcorn, nearly untouched, had long since lost its warmth. They weren't eating, they just sat there silently, watching the final trailer of the day play on the screen, the flickering light casting soft reflections across their faces, their eyes filled with sadness, but still glimmering faintly with fragile hope. "Emma, if tomorrow really gets better, I promise I'll buy you a real soda, just like the good old days." "Okay, Grace, I'll wait." John heard every word, every small wish, so humble yet powerful, as if someone had gently touched an old scar on his heart. These weren't just idle whispers. They were heartfelt reminders from the very people whom Sunrise had once made happy. Silently, he watched them rise, slowly walk out of the theater. And in that moment, John realized, with every step they took away, every lingering glance cast back at the Sunrise Corner, a piece of the beautiful past was also quietly walking away from Sunrise. He lifted his gaze to the large wall at the front where, long ago, he had personally written the slogan, "Here, every day is a brand new beginning." But now, that slogan had been completely covered by a crooked makeshift poster advertising a Super Saver combo. John's fist clenched tightly. Over the past years, he had relentlessly chased growth, forgetting that a brand isn't built on profits, it's held up by the hearts of people. His gaze slowly turned toward the metal shutters that had just closed. Tonight, this would be the last night Sunrise faded into darkness. And right in that moment, as the sound of the film projector faded into silence, John made a solemn vow. "Tomorrow's dawn will begin again, right here. And this time, I won't stand on the sidelines. The air felt suffocating, as if the entire space was holding its breath, waiting for a storm to arrive. Rumors about an emergency meeting spread across every corner, from the ticket counters to the popcorn stands, from the screening rooms to the backstage storage. Everyone was uneasy, filled with uncertainty. At exactly 9 a.m., the grand doors swung open. John, the founder of Sunrise Theater, walked in, no longer the silent man hidden under a worn-out cap, but the commanding, dignified leader he once was. His tailored gray suit highlighted the gleaming silver name tag pinned to his chest. John Miller, CEO and founder, Sunrise Theater Group. A silent shockwave rippled across the lobby. Garethi, branch manager, turned pale, his hands instinctively clutching the counter's edge. Junior managers stood frozen, eyes darting away. And those two young women, who just the day before had only been able to afford the smallest bag of popcorn, sat in the front row, their eyes sparkling but shadowed with worry. John stepped up to the podium. His voice was calm and warm, yet sharp as a blade. Each word struck directly at the hearts of everyone present. "I once promised that Sunrise wouldn't just be a place to show movies, but a place where the most beautiful memories could be kept alive. But perhaps I let numbers and cold reports make me forget that promise. He gestured toward the tech crew. The giant screen lit up. One by one, raw, undeniable clips played. Gary openly accepting a thick envelope from a supplier, his expression cold and indifferent. Boxes of expired popcorn kernels, diluted soft drinks, and low-quality products being smuggled into storage. Gary's cold, calculated voice on recording, "You better contribute fully to the general fund, or forget about getting good shift schedules." And finally, the scene that broke everyone's heart. The two young women counting every last coin to buy the smallest bag of popcorn, their faces filled with sadness, yet still turning toward the theater, clinging to that fragile hope. The room fell into complete silence. John stared directly at Gary, his eyes cold and sharp as steel. "Gary, do you have anything to say before I sign your immediate termination?" Gary opened his mouth, sweat soaking through his shirt, but no words came out. John pulled out his pen and, without hesitation, signed the dismissal right there at the podium. "Cost-cutting is never an excuse to sell out human dignity. You are officially dismissed, effective immediately. And to those who stood by or enabled this behavior, either walk out of these doors now or stay and rebuild with integrity." Several people quietly lowered their heads and left, leaving behind a space filled with eyes now burning with newfound hope. John stepped down from the stage and stopped in front of the two young women. His gaze softened, filled with reflection and deep emotion. "Tell me, why did you two keep coming back here, even when everything had fallen apart?" One of the young women gently smiled, a sad smile, yet still warm. "Because we still hoped that one day this place would feel warm again, like those family movie nights we used to dream about." John felt his heart tighten, his throat constricted. In that very moment, he took their hands, clasped them firmly, and declared loud and clear, "From today, the Theater Reborn reform program officially begins, and you who never gave up hope will help me reignite that light." Right then and there, John offered them two life-changing opportunities. One was invited to join the customer service management team to personally lead and train others, restoring the heartfelt service spirit that Sunrise once proudly held. The other received an internal scholarship to enter the leadership development program, opening the path to one day becoming a theater manager. Thunderous applause erupted, like bells ringing to announce a new dawn. In that moment, John realized the dawn had truly returned to Sunrise Theater, not through the sunlight outside, but through the people brave enough to hope and begin again. The air inside the theater felt thick, almost suffocating. From the ticket counters, the popcorn stands, to the corridors leading into the screening rooms, everything seemed to have stopped breathing. People whispered quietly, exchanging worried glances. Unspoken questions filled their minds, yet no one dared to give them a voice. Exactly 9 a.m. The main doors swung open. John Miller, founder of Sunrise Theater, stepped inside. Gone was the man who once bowed his head beneath a worn-out cap. Standing before them was the very figure who had once written a legendary chapter in this place's history. In a perfectly tailored gray suit, polished shoes clicking confidently against the marble floors, and on his chest, a nameplate gleamed under the morning sun. John Miller, CEO and founder, Sunrise Theater Group. The room collectively forgot how to breathe. Garethi branch manager turned pale, as if the blood had just drained from his face. He slowly backed away toward the counter, his trembling hands gripping the edges. Lower-level managers bowed their heads, eyes darting away, avoiding the inevitable confrontation with their CEO. And there, seated in the very front row, were the two young women who just yesterday could only afford a small bag of popcorn. On their faces, a fragile hope flickered to life, but it was overshadowed by a deep fear that this fragile hope might vanish before it could even take form. John stood tall at the podium, his gaze swept across the auditorium, not filled with anger, but with a deep, lingering sorrow. His voice rose warm yet firm. Every word fell like a chisel carving itself into the hearts of those listening. Sunrise was never just a place to watch movies. It was a sanctuary of cherished memories, a place where each person found a piece of themselves. But perhaps I let cold, lifeless numbers dim that light. He nodded once. The giant screen lit up. The quiet murmurs died instantly. Only the sharp, echoing clicks of a mouse remained. One by one, raw and unfiltered videos appeared, their clarity leaving no room for denial. Gary bowing his head as he received a thick envelope from a supplier, a calculating smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. Expired popcorn containers, watered-down soda, and substandard products being hauled into storage and treated like nothing more than worthless, disposable goods. Gary's chilling voice captured in a recording. The common fund must be paid in full. Otherwise, forget about getting a good shift. And then, the screen showed the two young women carefully counting out coins, just enough to buy the smallest bag of popcorn. Their eyes glimmered as they gazed into the cinema hall, as if desperately trying to hold on to the last warmth of a bygone era. The entire room stood frozen, heavy, breathless, and filled with unspeakable sorrow. John turned sharply, his eyes cold and unwavering as he faced Gary directly. "Gary, do you have anything to say before I sign your termination right here and now?" Gary opened his mouth, but his throat was dry as sand. Sweat poured down like rain. His shirt was already drenched, but no words came out. John, without hesitation, drew his fountain pen and signed the termination letter right there at the podium. His decisive motion marked the end of a dark era. Cutting costs is never an excuse to sell out human dignity. You're fired, effective immediately, and to anyone who stood by and allowed this to happen, I suggest you reflect on your choices. You can walk out that door or stay and rebuild this place with integrity. Some people quietly lowered their heads and left. No one said a word. The room, once heavy with gloom, now shimmered with eyes rekindled by newfound hope. John stepped down from the stage and stopped in front of the two young women. His eyes softened, carrying the weight of countless sleepless nights and buried regrets. "Why did you two keep coming back here, even after everything had fallen apart?" One of them looked up, her lips curling into a bittersweet smile, warm and familiar, like something from the days long past. "Because we kept hoping that one day this place would feel warm again, just like those family movie nights everyone used to dream about." John felt his heart tighten, a painful lump rising in his throat. In that moment, he grasped their hands firmly, his voice rising with unwavering resolve. "Starting today, the Theater Reborn initiative officially begins, and you, those who never gave up hope, will help me reignite the light of this place." Right then and there, he offered them two extraordinary opportunities. One was invited to join the customer service management team, leading the revival of Sunrise's lost spirit of heartfelt service. The other received a full internal scholarship to join the theater's leadership training program, opening the path to becoming a future branch manager. A roaring applause erupted, thunderous like a long-awaited summer rain after a relentless drought. And in that very moment, John knew the dawn had truly returned, not through grand glass windows or dazzling neon lights, but through brave hearts, through people courageous enough to hope and bold enough to start again. It wasn't the harsh, glaring glow of cold neon lights, but the warm radiance shining from genuine smiles, from eyes filled with hope, and from the overwhelming joy that filled the grand foyer. At the central stage, beneath a large banner that read, "Theater Reborn," two young women, Emma and Grace, stood, tall and proud, now wearing crisp new uniforms, their posture confident, their presence inspiring. On their chests, name badges gleamed softly under the gentle golden lights. Emma Williams, Customer Experience Manager. Grace Miller, Operations Supervisor. Emma's voice rose, tender yet unwavering, her eyes scanning the packed auditorium, faces full of promise, people about to embark on the rebirth of Sunrise Theater. "We used to sit in the darkest corner of this theater with nothing but a small bag of popcorn and a fragile hope. But that hope carried us to this very moment. And starting now, we won't just wait for the dawn, we'll be the ones to light it for ourselves and for those who come after us." The hall erupted with thunderous applause, but this time, it wasn't just celebration. It was the heartbeat of people united by the same dream, a shared longing for revival. On the rooftop, standing by the wide glass windows that welcomed the morning sun, John Miller stood in silence, his hands tucked in his pockets, his eyes gazing quietly at the vibrant scene below. Laughter and conversation echoed like a sweet symphony, blending perfectly with the familiar scent of freshly popped buttered popcorn and the rich aroma of hot coffee. John closed his eyes, took in a deep, warm breath, letting old memories and new emotions flood his heart. And when he opened his eyes again, a peaceful, fulfilled smile appeared, the smile of a man who had finally found his way back to himself and to the dream he thought he had lost. A soft whisper escaped his lips, gentle yet resolute, a promise etched deep within his soul. This is the dawn I always dreamed of, not with the blinding glare of cold, artificial lights, but with the tender glow of hope rekindled, of genuine joy returning after so long. The air was charged with vibrant, positive energy, the kind of life-affirming force that blooms only after the darkest nights When it feels like all hope had faded, yet somehow a new day rises. John turned around, his gaze sharp and unwavering, staring directly at Gary. "Gary, do you have anything to say before I sign your immediate termination right here?" Gary opened his mouth, but his throat went dry. Sweat poured down like rain. His shirt was soaked through, but no words came out. Without hesitation, John pulled out his fountain pen and signed the termination papers right there at the podium, his decisive stroke, drawing a firm line under a dark chapter. Cost-cutting is never a justification for compromising human dignity. You are hereby terminated effective immediately. And to those who aided or turned a blind eye, look within yourselves. You may walk out of this room right now, or stay and start over with integrity. A few lowered their heads and quietly left. No one said a word. The room, once heavy with gloom, now seemed to shimmer with eyes lit by a newly rekindled hope. John stepped down from the stage and paused before the two young women. His eyes softened, carrying the weight of all the sleepless nights and silent regrets. "Why do you still come back here, even after everything has changed so much?" One of the young women looked up and smiled, gently, a bittersweet smile, warm like the days of old. "Because we still believe that one day this place will feel warm again, like those family movie nights we all once dreamed of." John felt his heart tighten. In that moment, he clasped their hands firmly and declared, his voice filled with resolute determination, "From today, the Theater Reborn reform program officially begins, and you, those who never gave up hope, will help me reignite that light." Right there and then, John offered them two special opportunities. One was invited to join the customer service management team to become the leader who would rebuild the spirit of service that Sunrise had once stood for. The other received an internal scholarship, enrolling in the management training program, a path that would lead her to become a future theater manager. The applause erupted like thunder, a resounding promise of a refreshing rain after a long, parched drought. And in that very moment, John knew the dawn had truly returned, not through the grand glass windows or the glaring neon lights, but from courageous hearts, from people brave enough to hope and willing to begin again. That morning, Sunrise Theater shone brighter than ever before. It wasn't the blinding glare of cold neon lights, but a warm, radiant glow emanating from complete smiles, eyes brimming with hope, and a joyous spirit that spread throughout the welcoming lobby. At the center stage, beneath the grand banner reading Theater Reborn, two young women, Emma and Grace, now stood tall, dressed impeccably in their new uniforms, embodying the role of true inspirer. Pinned to their chests, their name tags gleamed softly under the warm golden lights. Emma Williams, Customer Experience Manager. Grace Miller, Operations Supervisor. Emma's voice rang out gentle, yet unwavering. Her gaze swept across the crowded auditorium filled with fresh faces, people about to embark on the revival journey of Sunrise Theater. We once sat in the darkest corner of this very room, holding a small bag of popcorn and a fragile hope. But it was that hope that carried us to this day. And from this moment on, we are not just welcoming the dawn, we will be the ones to light it with our own hands, for ourselves and for those who come after us. Applause burst out joyfully, but this time, it wasn't merely for celebration, it was the resounding heartbeat of people sharing the same pulse, the same burning desire for renewal. Upstairs, beside the wide glass window bathed in morning sunlight, John Miller stood quietly, his hands tucked into his pockets. His calm eyes looked down upon the lively scene below. Laughter echoed sweetly, blending with the familiar aroma of freshly popped buttered popcorn and steaming coffee. John gently closed his eyes, taking a deep breath of the warm morning air, letting the old memories and new emotions flood through his soul. And then, as he opened his eyes, a soft, contented smile curved his lips, the smile of a man who had found himself again and reclaimed the spirit of the legacy he had once lost. A whisper rose from deep within his chest, light yet echoing like an eternal promise. This is the dawn I always dreamed of." That morning, Sunrise Theater truly shone like never before. It wasn't the blinding brilliance of harsh neon lights, but the gentle, warm light radiating from eyes filled with hope, from smiles that had finally returned in their fullest. The entire lobby overflowed with a vibrant, positive energy, the kind that only comes after the darkest nights, a life renewed after despair, when hope seemed lost. Right at the center stage, beneath the grand banner, emblazoned with the words, Theater Reborn, A Journey of Revival, two young women, Emma and Grace, appeared, stepping forward slowly yet with undeniable pride. They were no longer the timid girls who once huddled in the corner of the cinema. Now, with eyes shining with pride, they stood before the entire auditorium, ready to inspire a new generation. Pinned to their uniforms, their name tags gleamed under the spotlight. Emma Williams, Customer Experience Manager. Grace Miller, Operations Supervisor. The room fell silent as Emma took the microphone. Her voice rose warm but firm, each word stirring deep emotions in every heart present. Perhaps none of us here could ever forget those days when we sat curled up in the darkest corners of this theater, holding just a small bag of popcorn and a fragile flicker of hope. But it was that tiny glimmer of hope that guided us to today, to stand here, not just to greet the dawn, but to light it with our own hands for ourselves and for all of you. The entire auditorium erupted into thunderous applause. Yet this was not simply applause for celebration. It was the harmonious rhythm of hearts beating as one, a shared and powerful longing for rebirth. Those who once felt hope slipping away now sensed the light rekindling right within their own hearts. High above, behind the large glass window welcoming the morning sunlight, John Miller stood quietly, his hands tucked in his pockets, his eyes calm but glowing with warm light. He listened to the vibrant life below, the cheerful laughter, the familiar greetings, the sound of children tugging at their parents' hands while waiting eagerly at the popcorn counter. The buttery aroma of fresh popcorn blended with the scent of newly brewed coffee, filling the space and carrying with it memories of days when John himself once turned the old popcorn machine and carefully poured each cup of hot coffee. He gently closed his eyes and took a deep breath, letting the memories wash over him like a slow-motion film. When he opened his eyes again, the morning light poured through the glass, making everything before him shimmer like a long-forgotten dream finally awakened. A soft smile crept across his lips, and with a voice as light as the breeze, yet echoing like a solemn vow etched deep in his heart, he whispered, This is the dawn I always dreamed of. Asterisk. You may build a mighty empire, but if you forget the value of humanity, it will all be nothing more than a castle built on sand. A truly sustainable enterprise isn't built on cold, hard numbers. It is built upon hearts that have been warmed, dreams that have been reignited, and lives that have found happiness because of you. For in the end, the greatest legacy you leave behind will not be the towering buildings or dazzling financial reports, but the lives you have touched through your kindness and compassion. Asterisk.